Hello everyone. Welcome to another video on learning CSS. In this video, let's understand CSS Grid. My name is Pramod Kumar, and if you are new to this channel, please subscribe and also don't forget to click the bell icon. Let's start. CSS provides two layouting models, Flex and Grid. Flex is a one-dimensional model. I have created a video to explain how Flex works in my channel. I'll provide the link in the description below. Grid is a two-dimensional layouting model. You can create layouts in rows and columns. Let's understand this with some examples. I have created an HTML with a container div consisting of 5 child elements. To convert the container to grid, the first thing to be done is to add a CSS property display grid. Sorry. The grid starts to appear like this. This is because when no column definition is given, the grid assumes it is one column model and rows are implicitly created based on the number of columns and allocate the complete container. I'll add some column definitions here. For adding the column definitions, we need to make use of this property called grid column grid template columns. So here I'll have to define how many columns I need for my grid container and what would be its size. We can provide size in terms of absolute value, percentages, and fractions. So I'll first give an absolute value and show you how it looks. So I'm trying to create here two column model, and this is how it looks. Instead of giving absolute values, you can give percentages. So I'll give percentage. As I've given 50 percentage each, so two columns are taking a complete 100 percentage, and this is how it looks. And if at all, if you give anything above this, say I want to create a third column of 30 percentage, this is more than 100 percentage, and the third one will overshoot outside of this container. So we'll have to plan it accordingly. There is also one more problem by this percentage method of creating the columns that I'll explain in a bit. Assume I want a gap between the grid elements. I can specify that using this gap. You can see that the gap actually gives both horizontal and vertical gap, that is on the column and as well as on the row. Because gap is actually a combination of two properties, gap row and gap uh, column. So both are taking 10 pixels here. So if you want, you can actually provide different values to both of them, something like this. Here the column is 20 pixels and the row is 10 pixels, but there is a problem here that the navigation and right side bar has moved outside of the container. The reason is when the percentage is given, the percentage is considering the container width and container height, but not considering the gap. So that's one of the shortcomings with percentages. The other way of giving the definitions for columns is fractions. I'll create two column definitions using 1 FR each, and this is how it looks, where the gap is also considered and the grid is divided into two fractions because two columns are there and one fraction is given to each grid elements. Similar to columns, I can also provide the size for my rows. To do that, let me use grid template rows and provide some configuration. Say I want to create a 3 row config. I can provide, and I need the middle one to be bigger than the above and below one. So this is how I can give. I can give the same way as a column with absolute numbers and percentages as well. Once the grid is ready, grid layout is ready, you can actually see them how it looks in your dev tools. Let me show how it looks. Here you can go and actually press this, you will see the grid how it got created. So one fraction is used for the columns, 1, 3 and 1 fractions are used in the row definition. I'll go back to the code. Now, if I have to place my grid in such a way that some grid elements might cover two columns or two rows, that can be done on the individual container elements. Say, for example, my header has to take two spaces and it has to be completely spanning over the first row. That can be given on the particular element. So here I'm taking the header class here because the header child div is having a class of header, so I'm taking this header and I can actually specify where the grid has to start and where it has to end. So there are these properties for that: grid column start and grid column end. So I'll say grid column start as 1 and grid column end as I am creating two column definitions, so it has to end after the second one. So let me say like this, and this is what you see. So you can note that I have given some numbers 1 and 3 here. The reason for this is each and every line that gets created on the grid is numbered. So I'll show that again here. If you see here, the first line is actually the starting point, the second line is the middle one, and the third line is the end one. So in order to span this header over the complete first row, the starting point and the end point has to be provided. So that is what I have given in this configuration now. That is column start at 1 and column end at 3. Same thing can be done on the row. Say I wanted to start from the first row but it has to end at the third row. I can do that by this. Sorry, end at the third row. This is what it happened. So here you can see that the last one, the right sidebar and the footer, has taken very less space compared to the above ones. The reason is the grid template rows has the definition for only 3 rows, and anything after this will be created based on its contents height or width. In this, right sidebar and footer is the fourth row that got created, and hence its height is taken only with respect to its content. Assume I have to give a specific height for the auto created rows or columns. I can make use of a parameter called grid auto rows, and I can mention some size to it, so that in case if for some reason auto rows are created or auto columns are created, that can have some specific height and width. So I'll remove this now for now, and I'll make sure that it ends on the column 2. So this is how my container looks. Let me change the column definitions a little bit. I will just create it as a 3 column just to have navigation, content and the right bar on the same place. So this is how it looks. But header actually has got reduced by one size because of the increased column, so that I can increase it again here, and this is how it looks. I also need the footer to be having the complete row, so for that I can have the grid column start and grid column end similar to the header. There is no need of row and row start and end because it is already in a proper row that we need. So this is how it looks. These 4 properties can be combined into one property called grid area, where we can mention all the 4 different properties here. So the definition, if you see here, it says it's a shorthand for grid row start, grid column start, grid row end and grid column end. Okay, with slash, it has to be given with slash. So grid row start is 1, column start is 1, row end is 2 and column end is 4. I'll remove the top 4 and you'll see the same effect. So this is how you can create your layout, and you can span your content in whatever way you want. There is another way, there is a property called span, where you can mention like how many columns it has to span. Say for example, in this I've said that the last column should be on the fourth line, so that I can also give it as span 3. So it spans over 3 columns here, and you get the same result. The numbers 1, 1, 2 that I have mentioned here, these are the numbers that is given by the grid layout. You can also mention your own name to the grid columns and rows, and then use them in your definition of your child items. So I have taken this as an name for my columns, like it starts with column 1 start, column 2 start, 3 start, and 4 start. So I'll show you how it looks now in the grid layout here. Yeah, you can see here the first line is call 1 start, call 2 start, call 3, and call 4, and etc. So if you want to use it now in our header definition or footer definition, we can do that. So here I'll just replace the column 1 as call 1 start, and the last one as call 4 start, and we get the same result. You can use the same naming convention for your grid template rows as well, and that can be, those names can be used in your grid area definitions of whatever the grid elements you are creating. I've seen almost all the properties that are needed for you to create a layout using CSS Grid. I hope you will be able to create the layouts using CSS Grid in your future work. That's all for this video. If you like this video, please share, subscribe, and like. I'll meet you in my next video. Until then, thanks and bye.